Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. So once again, welcome everyone to today's meeting on Fidelity and Adaptations for the New Normal. My name is Patrick Ahern with RTI, and I'll be helping out with the virtual room today. Just a quick note, when you log in, your microphone will be automatically muted. If you have any questions for our presenters, you may submit those into either the Q&A window or the chat window. And if you run into any technical issues with the Zoom, just reach out to me in the chat window as well. There will be a brief feedback survey that will open in a separate window once the meeting is over. So if you would take a moment to submit your responses, the project team would greatly appreciate it. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn the meeting over to Katie to introduce today's meeting. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Patrick, and welcome everyone. We're really delighted to talk to you today about fidelity and adaptations for the new normal. And I'm particularly excited to turn this over to Kelly Gaynor, who is going to tell us a little bit more about fidelity and adaptations, and we're going to have a chance to do some breakout exercises and think more about what we mean by these concepts and how we can really think about how do we make sure that the programming that we're offering to our young people through the personal responsibility education program is relevant and resonant, and that they can get the kind of concepts that we're relaying because they feel connected to the material. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelly to get us started.
All right, thanks, Katie. Welcome, everyone. My name is Kelly Gaynor. I am the training manager with ETR. I think a lot of folks already know me. I'm one of the TA providers for this project. I am also a former grantee myself, and I think that we're going to have some interesting conversations about what fidelity looks like, sort of in our, I was going to say post-COVID, but whatever this is time, and how some of the pivoting that we all did during the pandemic has kind of changed the way we look at fidelity and adaptations to an extent. So I'm delighted to have all of you here with me. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping of my own, and then we'll start with an icebreaker. So as Patrick had mentioned, you're muted. You can check and make sure that your computer volume is working, make sure that you're connected. We are going to do a breakout activity, so we do want to make sure that you'll be able to be heard later. And if you have questions at any point and want to come off mute, that will work as well. If you're comfortable, I always love to see faces. It's great to kind of connect with people while I'm chatting. So if you can and you're able, go ahead and turn those videos on. We're going to do a lot of different, we're going to use a lot of different engagement tools. So some of them include the annotation tool, breakout rooms, as I already mentioned. Reactions are always fun. And of course, the chat is probably the best way to ask questions in the moment and to connect with your fellow grantees. So I also want to take a minute to talk about our learning community agreements. We want to make sure that we hear and appreciate each other's perspectives and insights, and just make sure that we're using this hour and a half in the best way that we can. So just very quickly, I'll read what we have up here, and if you have other suggestions, you can go ahead and pop those in the chat. So we have participate fully. This is not a webinar where you can set it and forget it. I don't believe in that. We're going to be talking. We're going to be having conversations. We're going to do activities. And so I want to make sure that folks are engaged, because you'll get more out of it that way. Delay distractions as much as is possible. I know that that's a challenge and everyone's got a lot going on. I'm aware of that myself, working on some proposals right now, as I imagine a lot of you are as well. But as much as you can, delay those distractions. Honor the different experiences of your fellow grantees. Be brave and explore. This is a good opportunity to kind of test some things out and see what works and what doesn't. Remember that our intent and our impact are not always the same. And so we want to make sure that we are, being mindful of how our words and our actions impact others, even if it's not what our intent was, that we fix that harm. And so I'm going to check the chat and see if we have any others. I see lots of folks introducing themselves, many familiar names in the chat. Are there any other group agreements that we would like to add before we continue? All right, I will go ahead and move us along to the next slide. So our objectives for today, here's what we're hoping to accomplish in the next hour and a half. We're going to define fidelity and adaptation in the context of sexual health education programming. We're going to identify what core components, core pedagogy, and core implementation are for at least one evidence-based program. Determine at least 3 reasons why adaptations may be necessary for a successful implementation, and then practice thinking through potential adaptations using what I'm calling the adaptation equation, because I like rhymes. So that is the basic plan. We're also here to hear from all of you, to hear about your successes and your challenges, and to to learn from each other, because we're all doing this work of maintaining that balance between fidelity and adaptation. All right, so very quickly, a brief agenda of what we're going to go through today. So we're going to segue into our icebreaker as promised in just a moment. After that, we're going to talk about cookies. For folks who are on the East Coast like myself, it's definitely that like mid-afternoon snack part of the day. So we're going to all get hungry for cookies, I think. And we're going to talk about how this story relates to fidelity and adaptations. Then we're going to transition to discuss the reasons why you would need to adapt a curriculum and take a look at this adaptation equation. Then we'll spend some time in small groups, kind of practicing, and then we'll talk about what that experience was like and what you noticed about creating adaptations. And I'll also give you some feedback and some tips for creating adaptations that work. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A and close out the webinar. So that is the basic plan. Are there any questions before I jump us into the icebreaker? Just doing the extra long pause in case somebody can't find the unmute button. I am on Zoom all day, every day, and I still sometimes can't find it, so I get it. All right, seems like we are good to go. So we're going to do an icebreaker. We're going to use a program called Mentimeter for our icebreaker. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, I highly recommend it. I am not paid by Mentimeter to say that, but I find it really useful for virtual settings and in classrooms as well. So I just put a link in the chat, and what I'm going to ask folks to do is go ahead and click on that link and tell me what word comes to mind when you hear the term fidelity. So you hear fidelity, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Try to use single words. You will have 3 entries, so you can write 3 separate single words. But for the purposes of the activity, it'll work better if they're not like phrases as much as you can. So I'm going to stop my share, and I will share the Mentimeter so that y'all can see kind of what it's populating with. And I see stuff coming up already. Can't even get it shared in time. Oh, look at this. Interesting, interesting. So what it's doing is creating a word cloud, as y'all can see. And so what's interesting is that most of the words are similar in size, which means that there's not like one word that's really jumping out. The ones I'm seeing right now are quality, structure, exact. I see faithfulness and accountability. Those seem larger. It's pretty cool with this many people, like it just keeps moving. I'm getting a little dizzy looking at it. So I see correct, structure, consistent, requirement. I see oppressive. Thank you for your honesty. I see rigidity, consistency, compliance, commitment. Interesting. So none of these words are like, it's my favorite thing ever. Of course, I told you not to use multiple words, but so we have some negative words, we have some kind of neutral words, and maybe some positive, right? Faithful, quality, like those are good things. Yeah, interesting. You see unchanged, repeatable. Nice. Awesome. So what I'd like folks to do is keep these words in mind as we continue through the webinar, and think about, what do you think are some of the reasons why these are the words that came up, and and how we could maybe think about fidelity in a different way when this webinar is complete. All right, I'm going to go back to the slides. Thank you everyone for participating in that activity. Again, Mentimeter is a lot of fun. I love being able to do those word clouds in real time. It's really dynamic for learners. Okay. All right, so let's talk about some cookies. And yes, I'm already regretting this picture, like my mouth is watering. So this should be fun. So I'm going to tell you all a little story about a cookie party. And some of you, if you've been in my trainings before, you've probably heard this story before, but bear with me. I'll try to mix it up a little bit for you. And we'll relate that story to Fidelity in just a moment. Okay, so first you have to remember back to a time when people had parties. And then once you remember back to that time, think about parties where people were comfortable sharing food. And now you're kind of starting to get this feel for the cookie party. So we have these three friends and they're hosting a cookie party, and they're going to all make cookies and exchange them, and everyone's gonna get to eat lots of cookies and have some fun together. So we're going to look at each of these three friends and kind of see how they approach making the cookies for the party. So the first person on the left here, we have Dominique, she, her. And so Dominique is your classic type A person, right? And so she looked up a recipe for chocolate chip cookies on the internet. And she follows the recipe exactly, right? She's like the kind of baker with the kitchen scale, right? Spoons and levels to make sure there's not like too much in the scoop. She's got this recipe 100% exactly the way it was written, and her cookies turn out exactly the way the picture did online. So that's Dominique's cookies. So then we have Riley. Riley is more your like flying by the seat of his pants kind of guy, right? And so he goes to make the cookies and he's already running late for the party, and he realizes that he doesn't have any eggs. So he just doesn't put in any eggs, right? Just skips that step, keeps going, keeps making the cookies. Then he goes and puts them in the oven and realizes he's so late that he has to cut the time down that they're in the oven by 10 minutes. I don't know when the last time y'all baked chocolate chip cookies, they're only in the oven for like 12 minutes. So his cookies are kind of a goopy mess. At least they don't have eggs in them. And so then we have Jordan. So Jordan also looks up the same recipe that Dominique and Riley used, but decides that they're going to send out a little like doodle poll before the party to see what their friends like in their chocolate chip cookies, right? Because everybody's got a slightly different recipe, right? Some people like them with nuts in them. Some people don't. Some people use like vanilla pudding mix to make it like chewier, right? You've seen all those charts where like if you put too much butter in, what happens, and all those different things. So Jordan wants to make sure that, they're aware of what their friends like. And so the survey comes back and it turns out that most of their friends like nuts in their chocolate chip cookies and a little bit of cinnamon too, which sounds kind of interesting. I would try that. So they follow the recipe just like Dominique does, except that they add these two additional ingredients. So my question to all of you is, whose plate do you think was empty at the end of the night? Whose cookies do you think, whose cookies do you think people most wanted to try? Okay, seeing some early votes for Jordan. All right. I see Jordan said Jordan in the chat. That's, I think, my first time. Yeah, I see, unless lots of people had a nut allergy. Well, presumably since the survey, most people said that that's what they wanted. Yeah, that is fair. I also really like cookie dough, so I get that. So in general, right, we think Jordan's, that seems to be the most common answer, that Jordan's plate was probably empty. I did see a handful of folks who said Dominique, right? Dominique followed the recipe, made the textbook cookie. So I'm sure that some of those cookies were pretty satisfying as well. All right, so if you couldn't tell, right, this is a very very intense metaphor for when we're talking about fidelity and adaptation. So we're going to translate from our cookie story to an evidence-based intervention. So cookie main ingredients, right? So first you have the things you need to make the cookies, right? The ingredients. So flour, sugar, eggs, chocolate chips, whatever. Then you have the kitchen tools that you need to use to get the cookies to the place they need to be, right? So you need to have a bowl to mix things in, you need to have a spoon to stir, and you need to have like a cookie sheet, a tray, something to put in the oven. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the cooking time, right? You have to have the right amount of time to measure all the ingredients, to mix everything, the right amount of time to put it in the oven, so that you end up with cookies and not a mess. And so all of those things translate really nicely into what we have when we're thinking about evidence-based interventions. So in place of ingredients, we have core content, right? So if your intervention is an HIV prevention intervention, taking out mention of HIV is obviously going to have a huge impact on the curriculum, on its effectiveness, on what you're trying to do, right? With core pedagogy, in that case, we're talking about the methods that you're using to get that information across. So if your curriculum is very interactive and you change it to being a lecture, you're changing the way you're doing it. You're taking some of the tools you have, those interactive activities, and you're replacing them or getting rid of them entirely. And then finally, core implementation. Here we're talking about what you actually need to implement the program. So again, core content is the essential parts that relate to what's being taught. Core pedagogy is the methods, the strategies, the techniques that facilitators use. And then core implementation are those logistical elements of a program that lead to an environment where you can deliver your program and do so effectively. Okay, whoops, sorry about that. I forget that the mouse scroll button will do the same thing as clicking. Okay, so looking at the cookie party one more time, let's take a look at what happened with each of our cookie bakers. So in the case of Dominique, she followed Fidelity to a T, right? And used the recipe exactly the way it was written. She didn't make any adaptations, and as a result, most of her friends, those folks who, really like the little bit of cinnamon, I'm sure they still like the cookies. I'm sure they still got something out of it, but maybe not quite what they needed. So then Riley, obviously the fidelity was all over the place. So core content, right? He was missing the eggs and just omitted them. And core implementation, he was missing time to be able to make the cookies effectively. And so again, other than our friends who really like raw cookie dough, those cookies are not going to meet the needs of the group. They don't have everything that they need to have. And so then finally, we have Jordan. And so Jordan is that balance of the two. They both implemented with fidelity, right? They used the same recipe as Dominique and included all of those ingredients. And they also took into account what's different about their particular group. And as a result, their intended outcome was achieved, right? Everybody liked the cookies. So I think, sometimes when we're talking about fidelity, we're thinking about it as like, we want to do the best we possibly can to maintain every single activity exactly the way it was written. And actually, that's counterproductive in a lot of cases because, these curricula were written in some cases a long time ago, in some cases with a population very different from the folks that you work with now. And as a result, it's really important to be thinking about, well, what needs to change? How are we making sure we're meeting the needs of the youth, even if that does mean some of those green and yellow light adaptations, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so now let's take a step back and think about, we've talked about fidelity and what it is, and we're starting to see this relationship between fidelity and adaptations. So now I want to do a quick brainstorm and just chat about what are some of the reasons that you may need to adapt a curriculum. What are some of the things that may come up? And so you can go ahead and put answers in the chat. You can also come off mute if you'd like to, but what are some of the reasons, maybe reasons that you have created adaptations in the past, or what are some other reasons that, folks might need to adapt a curriculum? All right, seeing some answers pop in already. I see time allocation, absolutely. Culture, virtual curriculum delivery. Yep, I see cultural differences in the classroom, inclusivity, DD population, I'm assuming developmental delay population. If I'm wrong about that, Tasha, just let me know. Virtual delivery, literacy, culture, updates in science and medicine. Yeah, birth control and STI information, and especially HIV. HIV has changed so much since an intervention like Making Pro-Choices was first written. PEP and PrEP didn't exist. Undetectable equals unpassable was not messaging that we used, right? And so it is really important to update those. Unintentionally perpetuate stereotypes. Yeah. I would go so far as to say maybe even intentionally occasionally, but unintentionally, for example, videos that are, only youth of color being shown to a group of only white students, right? There's some potential stereotypes if these are the folks in the video, who have STIs or whatever the situation might be. Let's see. Students don't know the traditional classroom style anymore. Yeah, the way we teach is very different. School requests, yep. And I see no condom demonstrations. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Stereotypes, culture, reducing stigma and shame, adapting for students who have zero prior sex ed knowledge. Yeah, a lot of these curricula are kind of assuming like basic anatomy knowledge and basic puberty information. And for a lot of our young people, that's not a safe assumption that they already have that. To be within state laws. Yeah, these are all really good examples of why you might need to adapt a curriculum. So I'm going to show you my list. A lot of these you already said, so I won't go into too much detail. We mentioned cultural relevance quite a bit. Increasing interactivity. These programs, students are almost always going to learn better when activities are interactive, when they're being engaged in different ways. You may have some learners that are better with visual processing and some that are better if they hear things, right? And so, changing that up for folks' learning styles. Virtual and hybrid learning came up quite a bit, absolutely. State codes and requirements, we saw that one in the chat, making sure that we're looking at these programs with a racial and equity lens, and the way we look at that changes, right? We learn new things, we come up with new best practices, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to reflect that work. School constraints came up a few times, being more trauma informed. The trauma-informed approach has existed for a long time, but its integration with other areas has not. And especially with a topic as sensitive as sexuality education, being trauma-informed is so important. Making sure it fits with the community that you are working with. We heard increasing medical accuracy. I threw in circumstances beyond your control to cover everything from something like COVID to there's a fire drill in the middle of your class, to, there was some kind of emergency or some kind of situation that's happening within a community that you couldn't have predicted, but now your young people are going through something and it changes the way that you are able to relate with them. Being more inclusive, we mentioned being linguistically appropriate and age appropriate, making sure that we're speaking the same language as our students, metaphorically and literally in some cases, and making sure that it's leveled to be the right, reading level and the right content for your young people. And I see also another addition in the chat, which was adding more language around informed and affirmative consent. Yeah, that's something that a lot of our evidence-based interventions, again, affirmative consent, that conversation is evolving. And many folks had not heard of affirmative consent when some of these curricula were originally written. So these are all reasons why you may need to make an adaptation. So the next question is, okay, well, how do we actually do that? So let's take a look. So this is what I call the adaptation equation. And so the most important thing really here to remember is to keep a focus on what the activity was meant to do in the first place. So if you're looking at a particular activity, is it a knowledge activity, right? Is it a true false game? Is it a skills-based activity like a condom demonstration? Is it about attitudes and having folks think about their values, or encouraging folks to develop more self-efficacy around a particular skill? So you want to think about, what is my module or activity? What is the goal? What are the objectives? How is it doing that? And make sure those come out on the other side. If you do that, you are maintaining that core, the core content, right? And then you are also looking at the implementation and the pedagogy as well. And so when you are adapting an intervention or a particular activity, plan it and map it out. I know all of you have submitted adaptations probably to your funders, right? And so you can't just say, oh, I'm going to change it, I'll figure it out, right? Map it out, figure out exactly what you want to do. And then this is the part that sometimes folks don't do, which is to track it, document it, and reflect on it. So sometimes the first go around, right, the first adaptation that we make for a particular problem falls flat on its face. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it wasn't the right thing. Sometimes it seemed like it would be good in theory, and then you go and do it and it just isn't. And that's okay, but you've got to go back and say, okay, so clearly this thing is not working. What can we do instead? Or how can we tweak this or change it? So again, make sure you're keeping the goals and the content in mind, and make sure that you're planning it out and tracking and reflecting. And so, some other things to make sure that you are keeping in mind. Apologies, I'm getting alerts on my computer here. Is to make sure that you can keep track so that you can replicate what you've come up with in the first place. And then also so that your funder can kind of see, okay, this is what I've changed and here's how it's working. And you can keep track of like, okay, so I have these 4 adaptations, or I have these adaptations in this particular site, and I have these other different ones for this site, right? Make sure that you have that all kind of spelled out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is take a little bit of time.
Kelly, before we go into that, there is one comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to speak to this about the curriculum being repetitive.
Yeah, so the comment, and thank you, Katie, for lifting that up for me. So Julianne in the chat says sometimes the curriculum is repetitive or the order doesn't flow as it's written. Totally fair and valid. One thing that happens sometimes with these programs, right, is they keep getting edited and revised, and sometimes that causes things to get kind of shifted from where they originally were, and that can affect the flow. I think the repetition is usually on purpose, because the idea is that we're sort of building that knowledge, and we want to kind of layer it and sort of scaffold the information throughout the curriculum. So sometimes I think that repetition is on purpose. But when it doesn't flow, that's challenging, right? For you as a facilitator, you want to make sure that your students are engaged. And if you're like flipping through the pages and going, wait, that doesn't make sense, hang on, right? Like your students aren't going to be paying attention to that. And they're not going to get as much out of it. It is tricky. One of the things that I would say is that's trickier about Fidelity is moving like activities around. In general, like staying in the same order as it's written is recommended, but there may be exceptions to that. And, the worst thing that happens with Fidelity is, you may bring a particular request up to your funder, to your supervisor, to whoever. You may look at it, you may get in touch with the developer, right? And they may say, sorry, that's red light, but like no one's gonna take away your funding because you suggested something. So if something doesn't fit, if something doesn't flow, it can never hurt to talk to somebody about it, to kind of feel like, well, what are some strategies? What are some possibilities there? So I always encourage and empower folks, like if something isn't working, tell someone. If you are the educator, tell your supervisor. If you're the supervisor, talk to your funder. It's always worth kind of taking a look at and seeing if there's something that can be done. Awesome. Any other questions while we're kind of paused here? Okay. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of practice making some adaptations. Again, I'm assuming that many of you have made or approved adaptations before, but just kind of taking a look with this different lens. And so what we're going to do, I'll kind of go through what the basic plan is, and then I'll show you an example of what it'll look like so you can kind of have a feel for it. So each group, we're going to split into, I think, 12 groups, and each group is going to get a scenario where adaptation may be necessary, and you're going to work in your small group to come up with some kind of a plan using the tools that we've talked about so far. And then as we have time, when we come back together, folks can kind of share what they came up with or some of the concerns they had, what were some of the strategies. So let me go ahead and show you what one of these looks like, just to make sure folks kind of have a feel for it. Okay. So this is one of the examples. There are 6 different examples. So we'll have 2 groups kind of working on the same examples, but you'll have your own Padlet to work in. And so what you'll see on the left here is it says scenario, and then you can see what your particular situation is. It may be very specific to an activity. It may be more general about, core implementation. Suddenly the periods are 45 minutes instead of 60 and you can't get anything done. Or they could be very specific, like this one is about some particular role plays in the curriculum. So what you'll do is go through, and in some cases, not every single category will necessarily apply based on what the adaptation is that you're thinking about. But what you'll do in your group is you can just click the plus, right? And so you can write out what was the original goal or objective, or what is the thing that you're starting with. Then you can go ahead and click on, this one and say, okay, well, this is about skills, right? Because it's role plays. Write skills and click publish, and it will appear on the Padlet. And so you'll just go through each step. And so the most important things we want to make sure that you're taking a look at is what could you actually do? Brainstorm together, use your wealth of knowledge from having done this in the past. What will you do? What reflections will tell you that it's actually working, and how can you track this? So think about how you can do it, and how you'll know it's successful, right? If we're talking about shorter classes, right, like the educator's not feeling rushed, for example, might be a way to indicate that you've fixed this issue. So I think you'll probably have about 15 minutes in your small groups to work on these. I will kind of circle with everyone to figure out how we're doing on time, and you may have a little bit more or less depending on where we're at. But you'll be with your small group for about 15 minutes, work on your particular scenario. One of the TA providers, so Lisa, myself, Katie, and Derek, will come into your room once you get there and give you the link to your Padlet so that there's not a million links and folks get confused. We'll come in and give you your Padlet link. One of you can click on it and then screen share, and you can all work together, or you can all work together in the Padlet separately, whatever's easiest for the group. And we'll bounce around a little bit as well to kind of check on folks. If you have questions, you can do the ask for help feature and we can come and help. And then we'll get back together and discuss how it went. So do folks have questions before we go into the breakout rooms?
For the original goals and objectives, take your best estimate. It's not like a test of how well you know each of these situations. It's just, take a guess as a group or determine it together.
Yeah, and it's also to give you kind of a format for how you may do this in more specific scenarios. A lot of these are kind of more general because I don't know which curricula you all use. So for group 6 in particular, it is a little bit more specific. I'm going to come to the group 6 groups and give you the role plays that I'm talking about so you can actually see them if you're not familiar with draw the line, respect the line. So, but yes, for objectives, for goals, kind of estimate that. Take your best guesses. And if it happens to be a program you work with, you can certainly cheat and look. All right, are there any other questions? All right, so Patrick, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and open the breakout rooms and we'll see you all back here in a little bit and we'll get you those links. All right, looks like we're getting folks back from the breakout rooms. I hope y'all had some good conversations in your small groups and you got to get a little bit, of a little brain stretch this afternoon or morning. So what I'd like to do is just hear from some groups, kind of generally, what was it like to do this activity? What were some of the kind of highlights of what your group talked about? So you can unmute and just talk to us, or you can let us know in the chat. But what was this activity like?
We're back.
So I see at least one comment that it was a little bit challenging without knowing the details of the scenario. Yeah, in a real situation, you'd have more information, presumably, and you'd know what's already been attempted or what you've already talked through, right? Which you might not know what your options are. It sounds like needed some more time. Yeah, we have so much to share with all of you that we did have to keep this a little bit short. Oh, good. So I see at least one person said that the scenario was relevant to their staff because they work in residential facilities that have fluctuating attendance. So that's great. I tried to use examples from my own experience as someone who implemented making proud choices and be proudly responsible for years and years. And so most of them were experiences that either I had or some of my subcontractors had as well. So, okay, wasn't sure if we were supposed to change the scenario. So the scenario was really the kind of the starting point, and then everything else kind of was to come out of that. So my next question for folks, and I see more answers populating in the chat, feel free to keep letting us know how it was in the activity, was the framework helpful? Having those categories, the adaptation equation, did that help to guide your discussion? Did it help to give you, kind of ground you when you were thinking about what to do in your small group?
I think it was really helpful, and I would use this in making our own adaptations. I think looking at the goals and objectives for the scenario, and we had a condom demonstration, so that was kind of straightforward and easy to work with since so many of us have experience with this. But it's felt like breaking it down a little bit, like what's the objective of that activity, and is it just a knowledge-based, and that therefore you can come up with adaptations that might be just knowledge-based, like learning the proper steps of condom use. You could do that with you wouldn't have to have a demonstration, because our scenario was that you couldn't do a demonstration. But if you really wanted to build skills among the students, then it would be kind of hard for them to not really to build skills on actually how to do it themselves in the situation, if they were in that situation. It felt like that objective would be less easy to accomplish if you had those restrictions.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for sharing. And I pulled up this because I was kind of, the fun thing about Padlet is I can see what y'all are doing. And so I was looking through them, and I felt like this had a lot of different suggestions and a lot of input. So I thought I would share it just to kind of give folks an opportunity to see what it looks like. Especially, I see a few folks in the chat had some difficulty, couldn't get the link to work. I apologize for that. But this way you can kind of see what it would look like. And I also saw a question about could we share the scenarios? What we can actually do is we can give the Padlets will continue to exist after this. I think we can just give out the links again, make sure they're the right ones and that folks can view them. But then you can see the scenario, and you can also see what your colleagues came up with around solutions. So the condom demo one is scenario number one for a reason, right? It's like the number one thing that we're often kind of fighting against is folks who are afraid of having the condom demo in their schools. And so I think the group here did a great job of looking through and figuring out what are the goals, and this combination that right, there is knowledge present, right? You're learning about what the steps are, their skill, the ability to actually put a condom on correctly, skills also around talking to a partner about it, and attitudes, getting more comfortable with using condoms, feeling like you can and want to use them. So I see lots of adaptations, ones that I've seen before, right? Like some kind of condom lineup activity, or showing a video if you can't do the physical demonstration in person. Talking through the steps without including the demo. Another resource, and Lisa, I'm going to ask if you can quick find this while I'm talking, not to try to sell an ETR product, but ETR has a product called the Con Demo, which is essentially like a nylon version of a condom that fits over a water bottle. And so sometimes it's just about having a real condom or having something that looks like a penis, those are the issues. And so you could potentially use that instead. I've also seen folks put socks on either feet or on a water bottle or something. You can get a little bit creative. And so then for how to track the adaptation, I see quizzing, right? See if they really are getting the information. Ask the students for feedback, how did this feel? How did you like doing this activity? Did it work? And so then I also see using a Kahoot, students are able to kind of go back through the steps and answer those quiz questions correctly. That is a hard thing to say. So this is just one example, but you can kind of see where we went through, and perfect. Lisa put that link in the chat as well. Any other groups? What was it like using this sort of equation? What other things came up in your groups? Other thoughts that you all have about this activity? Oh, nice. I see in the chat that someone purchased specifically branded reusable water bottles to use with the con demo. I think that's a great idea. It can be an incentive and gives the opportunity for folks to practice, and then they also get the water bottle. I love that. That's awesome. Yeah, the equation will be really nice for facilitators if adaptations are needed. One thing that hasn't come up yet, and I want to make sure that we have a chance to talk about, is that right now, when we're looking at these scenarios, we're talking about a planned adaptation. We're talking about something that is going to happen, and you have the time to do your research and get new materials and figure out what to do. There are also unplanned adaptations that happen all the time because somebody pulled the fire alarm in fourth period and now you have 20 minutes instead of 40, right? Or it's a testing day and there was a 2-hour delay and now everything's all mixed up. So, if you have these kind of tools already, it may help you to kind of make some of those decisions on the fly as you need to as well. So for facilitators who are in that moment, they can kind of quick think like, okay, I have all of these activities, right? What's the goal of these? Is there an alternative video that I can use that's shorter? Is there a way that I can add more time to the next class to make up what I've lost? So kind of having these tools available to you can even help in the moment as well. And I see Natasha in the chat said that they like it as well, because it's easy to use for all evidence-based curriculum. Yeah, so, I always in my career have focused on sex, but any evidence-based program, any kind of health behaviors, right, where you're trying to make sure that certain objectives and goals are being met, you can use this with any of those. It translates really nicely. And so I also see in the chat, the chat's hopping. We run into the issue of students getting pulled 4 to 6 at a time for scheduling at the end of each semester. I feel your pain there. Yeah, and so what it sounds like is that is something happens at the end of every year. So, is it possible to move the dates up in the year a little bit to avoid that, or to skip a particular day or days and then pick it back up, or to talk to the school and say, look, this is disruptive. How can we work around it? Is there some way that this could be done during another class? One thing I think that's worth mentioning is that in almost all of these cases, whoever the facilitator is, you're bringing a program into a school for free. You are giving them resources. You're giving the students incentives. It's okay to ask for what you need, right? You are providing a service. It's okay to say, hey, this thing keeps happening and it's disrupting what we're trying to do here. What can we do about it? And sometimes the schools say, oh my gosh, let's rework this. And sometimes there may not be anything they can do, or, you have to kind of figure something out on your own, but it can never hurt to ask. You remember that you are providing them with a service. Okay. I like the framework. It makes sense for conversations that we have when we go through adaptations, but forces you to think through the goals and objectives, KSA. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's easy to say, okay, we can't do this, activity. Let's do a brainstorm instead, because brainstorms are easy, right? Or because I like brainstorms. If it's not meeting the same needs, it's not the right thing. So kind of making sure that you're keeping those things in mind and keeping the young people in mind is really helpful. And Lisa has done a lot of work around unplanned adaptations. And, Lisa, if you have anything that you want to add, but in the chat, Lisa said They'll happen. You can't foresee them. The most important thing is to document what you did and navigate it. It's an opportunity to learn, and it may be an opportunity to employ a planned adaptation in the future, because something that starts out as unplanned, you may realize is just always going to happen, right? You may think, oh, it was just this one class because they were super chatty, right? I didn't get to all the activities. But if you start to notice like, oh no, this lesson is always over by 10 minutes, then you know that. I see that the teachers are just as surprised as you are that the kids are getting taken out. I have also experienced that. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time to get through the last few slides here. So feel free to keep putting your experiences in the chat, and hopefully we'll have a little bit more time to take a look at those in a few minutes. For now, I'm going to head back to the slides and narrate my life as I live it. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so I want to make sure that I give you some, so I've given you the adaptation equation and given you some opportunity to practice. I also want to make sure that I give you some just general guidance around adaptations, because I think, you know, it's just helpful to have a little bit more, more information and more tools in your toolkit. So the first thing I'll say is to start simple. I think I'm guilty of this as a chronic overthinker. I'm sure a lot of you were like the person who, you know, put the answer as B on your test and then like overthought and erased it and put it, you know, changed it and you were right the first time. Sometimes we get so caught up in the problem that we end up complicating things. It can help sometimes to like step back and say like, what actually is the problem, right? Sometimes it's not what you think it is. And sometimes you get so wrapped up in, okay, now we can't do a condom demo. We're not going to be able to get funded. We're, you know, all of these things are going to happen. It's like, well, wait, can you not do a condom demo, or can you not do it in this one particular way? And you can actually do it some other way. So the first thing is to start simple and make sure you know what the problem really is. The second bullet here is to get creative. I have shared this story a lot of times, so many of you have probably heard it, but I think it's just such a good example of not giving up when it seems like there's no hope for a curriculum to work out in a particular place. I was overseeing some folks who were teaching in some very rural school districts, and they were with the YMCA in that area. And they had been doing drug and alcohol education in those schools for years, very trusted, had great relationships, and they were adding prep programming. And everything was ready to go. And then one of the school districts said, wait, we can't do a condom demo. Like, you're going to have to get rid of the condom demo. So they went to ETR, and ETR was like, you can't get rid of the condom demo. It's, you know, that would be a red light adaptation. Can you figure out some other way? And so what this particular group came up with is that the issue that the teachers or the administration was really having was that the condom demo was going to be on school grounds. They didn't want the responsibility. And so what they did was the YMCA said, okay, we'll do a field trip for the one day of the condom demonstration. We'll bus everybody. We'll work that into our grant. We'll bus everyone to the YMCA. Then they get to see the YMCA. They get to, you know, learn about the services that are available there. And we'll do the condom demo at the YMCA. Teachers or the parents will need to sign a permission slip anyway, because they're getting on a school bus. So they'll know what it is. They can opt out if they want to. And we're still doing the condom demo. Worked like a charm. And the best part of that story is after a year or two, when no parents' heads exploded, the school was like, okay, you can just do the demo in the school. Like, we trust y'all. So not only were they able to continue to stay in the school that they thought they were going to have to drop out of, but eventually they no longer needed the adaptation in the first place. So sometimes it pays to get creative, to think outside the box, to say, you know, again, what is the real issue and how can we solve that? So I really like to share that story. So the third bullet is to prioritize young people, right? The people who you are giving this, you know, this program to. This is where your focus should be. And sometimes because we're trying to meet grant requirements and schools are breathing down our necks and we're having all of these problems, we kind of forget that like giving young people information and education is why we're here in the first place. So make sure that your students are your focal point, and you can ask yourself these questions to, to kind of make sure you're recentering when it starts to get in the weeds. So are the students getting what they need out of the activity? Are the students getting content that is accurate, youth-friendly, and relevant? Are the students being treated with respect? And are the students going to be better off for having this program? So again, are they getting what they need out of the activity? Is the content accurate and youth-friendly and relevant? Are the students being treated with respect? And are they going to be better off for having this program? In most cases, something is better than nothing, right? And so if we can figure out a way to work within the constraints of Fidelity and to work within the goals and objectives of our curriculum, we can make something work to make sure that we're bringing this information to the folks who need it. The next bullet point is don't reinvent the wheel. Lisa and I were talking about this just before we started. A lot of adaptation needs are not unique. It may feel like it is in the moment, but some of those scenarios, folks said, oh yeah, that's happening, right? Because these are the common things, condom demonstrations, students, too much turnover in a site, like these things happen to everybody. So reach out to your TA providers, submit a request, talk to your liaison group, reach out to other grantees who may be experiencing similar issues. Find out who else is using your curriculum and talk to them like, how did you handle this? This one activity takes twice as long as it says. What did y'all do? Because there's a pretty good chance that someone else has already come up with a really good solution, and that makes your life easier. And then finally, reach out to your developer. So I am with ETR, as I mentioned at the beginning, which means that Lisa and myself, right, we are the developer for a lot of the programs that y'all are using, like Making Proud Choices, Be Proud, Be Responsible, Draw the Line, et cetera, et cetera. So as ETR, we don't approve adaptations, right? Your funder is ultimately the one who decides whether an adaptation is acceptable or not. But we've seen them all before, right? And we know the curricula really well, and we're always happy to talk through ideas with you. That's honestly one of my favorite parts of my job, actually. So I'm going to put my email in the chat when we get towards the end here, but feel free, let us know, send us an email, say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm having this problem, and we can certainly talk through it with you. Then you still want to go to your funder and get approval, but you have some partners, so don't feel like you can't reach out. And for folks who are using other curricula that are not ETR, reach out to those folks too. I think they will have some ideas specific to your program that can be really helpful. Okay. So I want to make sure that I'm being cognizant of time here. So I would love to hear an example or two of successes that y'all have had, an adaptation that really worked well, some strategy for maintaining fidelity. So if anyone has, a particular story like the busing students to the Y story, we'd love to hear it to get some, some inspiration here. And I see Juliana raised her hand. Yeah.
So we've actually incorporated what we call program packets. It's not very fancy, but they have inside they have like a whiteboard with a marker and an eraser, which easily gets destroyed, but we've been working on that. And then we have like these pinch cards that have been really helpful for getting students to participate without having to speak in front of their peer, like in front of their classmates. So, if you pose a question to the class and no one like, you know, they all know the answer, or they all have an answer because it's an opinion question, but no one wants to say what it is. Instead of just sitting there in silence and having that awkward moment where you're like, okay, I want to give you all time to talk, but no one's going to talk. You can just pose the question and say, like, hey, on your whiteboards, go ahead and write down 3 things you remember from yesterday's class. And then they can like write it down, and then you give them time, count down, and then everyone will raise their whiteboard. That way, since it's facing the front of the classroom, no one is really seeing what's on each other's whiteboards. Or checking in with the class with this emoji strip, just like, all right, how are we all feeling today? You know, or how do we feel about this topic? Like, so that you can kind of gauge where people are. And the way that we use these is you just like pose the question, have them pinch a card, 3, 2, 1, they all hold it up, and then they put it down. And that way we get response and participation, and like, you can check in for understanding, like, how do we feel about this? Or, you know, do we need to slow down? Do we need to go back? That kind of thing. Engage understanding for the whole class in like a few seconds, rather than being like, are you awake? Are you listening? Do you get what I'm saying? And that has actually been super helpful to make the classroom environment, like, to make it more everyone is participating. And I think it builds rapport a lot quicker, because, you know, you're checking in with the class, you get a good feel for everyone and how they're feeling, what their understanding is. And it also is like really nice for inclusivity if like people are afraid to speak, but they're happy to write, or if they don't want to write something down, but they'd rather draw their answer out, like they can do it on the whiteboard. It's just a matter of making sure that they don't spend their entire class filling in the whiteboard and bleeding the marker dry. But that has been really nice just across the board, to make sure that people are engaged in class the whole time.
Yeah, I love all of this. I think they're good examples of increasing interactivity. I think it's also an adaptation for inclusivity. You talked about folks with like different learning styles, but also, you know, if any of you use like an agree-disagree activity, those usually involve getting up and going from one side of the room to the other. If you have folks with disabilities who cannot do that, right, then that activity is non-inclusive. Or as I had situations, sometimes the classroom was just too small. There was nowhere for us to do that. And so actually when you pulled out the paddle, I was smiling because we used those, and we'd have folks write. I think actually we wrote it in permanent marker, agree on one side and disagree on the other. And so they could just hold up the paddles and they could still get that like visual of like, oh, okay, most people have it this way, and, you know, have those conversations. But those are all some really great ideas for ways to make things more interactive that are small, that I would say are check with your funder. Sorry, I'm doing the disclaimer. Always check with your funder first. But I would argue that some of those, like the emoji strip, isn't even an adaptation in the first place. It's really just like a check-in.
Yeah, I mean, they're just paper. They're just paper that we laminated. It's like very low cost.
Yeah, well, I love all of that. Thank you so much for sharing. I want to make sure that we have time for questions. And, you know, if we also have more success stories, I mean, I'd love to hear them. I just want to make a quick note about COVID-19 and kind of, you know, why this was called like for the new normal, right? None of the interventions that we were using at the beginning of 2020, I think with very few exceptions, were designed to be virtual, right? But we figured out a way to do it. We figured out how to make sure that that content was there, that the implementation was there, even if it looked a little different. And even the pedagogy, we figured out how to do an agree-disagree activity virtually. We figured out how to make brainstorms work. We found new tools like Mentimeter and Padlet. And so, you know, fidelity is important. And we want those outcomes for our young people. And meeting students where they're at and responding to their needs is also really important. And so, you know, if you take nothing else away from this hour and a half, it's about a balance between fidelity and adaptation. And that's always going to swing towards the need of your participants. And, you know, that's the work we're doing, right? Is giving that information to our participants. So always check with your funders, always make sure you're getting approvals, and remember to keep those young people front and center. So at this point, if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat or you can come off mute and ask. And if anyone else has some great strategies like what Juliana shared, we also love to hear from folks about that as well.
You are all the experts out there, and I know that you all have a lot of tools in your tool belt. And thank you for sharing. And I think we just need to keep this conversation going and continue to figure out ways to connect all of you and to continue the communities of practice and sharing, because things change. The needs of your youth and your communities will continue to change. And again, you are all the experts. We learn so much from you. You learn from each other, and just creating this opportunity to continue to bring that front and center is really important. So thank you all so much for taking part today.
Yeah, absolutely. These are some resources. We'll be sending these out, but there are some statements on ETR's website around Fidelity, Fidelity monitoring tip sheets, and some other adaptation guidance that you can find. And the exchange has all kinds of great stuff. You can go in and type adaptation or Fidelity and all kinds of different resources will pop up. I see a few things in the chat. Okay, it's about getting the resources. Awesome. Oh, and I said I'd put my email in the chat, so let me do that now before I forget. And, certainly take advantage of us as your TA providers and also us as an ETR, your developers, right? We're here to help. We've been through this all before. We're happy to talk through things or brainstorm solutions or pull in other folks that we know are using the same program as you to help get you some more information. We all want you to be successful, and we all want, young people to get information that really is going to resonate with them and connect with them.
And just one plug, I see that, folks are interested in more specific information. If you are comfortable sharing some of the adaptations that you've made, I would encourage you to put them in the grantee network. It's like a kind of a whiteboard on the exchange. You do have to be logged in to access it because it's only for grantees. So I would encourage you to think about that. And then if you're a member of a liaison group or someone from your team or your project is a member, this is a great topic that we could talk about in there as well. And then thinking about that at that conference, we can think about ways to start these conversations. But it's great to we'll try to figure out how to pull out some of the adaptations that people are using, particularly around engagement as well.
I was going to make that plug for the conference too, Katie. If any of you are attending or some of representatives from your projects, this is a great time to continue the networking. And also, some of the developers will be there in the exhibition hall. And so it's an opportunity to talk directly with some people there. So again, we know that not everybody can attend and there's resources and limitations with the conference, but we'll do our part to stay connected with all of you and get information coming back out.
Yes, and I just recently solidified that I will be there and I will be at the ETR booth, and I've asked to have the con demo with me, so I have that to show folks. So if that was interesting to you, and we'll also have examples of our different EBIs and some of the other resources that we offer. So yes, you will see me there, and I'm happy to take more questions and chat with folks then. Oh, awesome. And it looks like we have someone who is going to be talking about adapting entry and exit surveys for folks with intellectual disabilities, and that they'll have a poster at the conference. That sounds awesome and very relevant to our conversation.
It also made me remember that we are having another webinar on May 9th, the same time, 2:30 to 4 p.m. Eastern, specifically on working with youth with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And we will, again, spend some time thinking about how to adapt. We'll be using some sample lessons from Making Proud Choices to think about what are specific adaptations we could make to meet the needs of diverse learners in our classrooms. So if you're interested in that topic, we'll be sending out the registration information tomorrow. So stay tuned for that.
All right, well, that's all I have, and there's just about 2 minutes left. If there are any last questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or stick around. Thank you all so much for participating in your small groups and answering and asking questions. I appreciate all of you and all the amazing work that you all do across the country. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your Tuesday.